You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanders,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Donna Everhart.
Authors. I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web. Beware the Chinaman by Stephen Taylor. The future is electric, but who holds the power? Sent by government agent Howard to pick up a stolen hard drive, Danny soon finds himself fighting for his life as he's chased across Europe by the mysterious and deadly Chinaman. The hard drive holds information to expose an organization called the Board, and its chairman wants it back. The Board's plan is to save the planet and gain global dominance through its ecological empire. The execution of the plan is by any means necessary. Beware the Chinaman, the new thriller by Stephen Taylor. Unleashing Iron, Book 3 of the Unwilling Souls series by Gregory D. Little, arrives April 24th and is available for pre-order now. Seslukani has one mission: keep humankind's murderous gods imprisoned. She's about to fail. The gods have achieved the unthinkable, inhabiting human avatars from within their prison's walls. They now gather followers and work to break it open from the outside. One of those avatars is Sess's own father. Just as all seems lost, Sess learns of a recently unearthed artifact so powerful that it can repair the prison and save her father from the possession that is killing him. But in the wrong hands, the artifact could demolish the prison instead of repairing it, and it's already been stolen. In a desperate race to control the object that will save or end the world, Sess faces a devastating choice as she realizes that no one is immune to the artifact's ancient promise of forgotten power. Not her family, not her friends, not even herself. Unleashing Iron is available for pre-order now. Order before April 24th to get the special sale price. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have one of my favorite writers, Donna Everhart, back on the show. She was on with us a year or so ago talking about her book, The Forgiving Kind, which I absolutely loved. Well, she has a new book called The Moonshiner's Daughter that is absolutely phenomenal. You need to have this book on your shelf. And, we're all looking for stories to escape into during, this kind of lockdown time that we're under, the sheltering at home. And this is an amazing book to get lost in on an afternoon. Welcome back to the show, Donna.
Well, first of all, I'm smiling really big as you're talking about my latest book. That was such a fine compliment, and thank you so much for having me back. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm excited to have you. Last year when we talked about that amazing book, and we talked about Southern writers and Southern fiction, and what makes storytelling in this part of the world a little bit different and a little bit special. I think I can say that.
Right.
Do you remember what the first book that you read, and maybe it was Southern fiction, maybe it wasn't, that made you feel like the characters were real people, and when you got to the end of the book, you were sad that it was over? Because, when I read one of your books, I feel like I've become part of the family. So to speak. Do you remember one of your first experiences when a book did that to you?
Absolutely. I'm actually glad you asked that question, because I get asked a lot of times when I'm at book events or doing something like this, what influenced me? And I had been a huge reader all my life, and I went through all these different phases, and I loved the books as I read them, but it was when I read Ellen Foster by Kay Gibbons. That was my first taste of Southern fiction. And that really doesn't make much sense to me, because I was born here in North Carolina. I mean, I'm Southern, to the core, but she was my first Southern writer. And that book spoke to me, because what I thought about was, these are my people. They talk like I do. They do the things that I do. Well, maybe not all, but that was the first story that really stood out to me, and kind of in some way launched this career that I have now, writing Southern fiction.
Donna, it's interesting when you write from the perspective of a certain people. There are there are things that set us apart from other parts of the world, and maybe it's the same thing if you grew up in the Bronx and you're writing stories about the neighborhood where you come from. There are things that set you apart from people that grew up in Miami or wherever. There are all these things. And there are things that we're proud of that make us who we are. There are also sort of inside jokes that we share with one another about why we're kind of quirky, and why some of the things that we do are funny. And we can say those things, but if other people say those things about us, we take offense to it. But it's kind of like in a family, like I can punch my brother, but you better not. Could you talk a little bit about when you're writing from the perspective of a certain people, and you happen to be one of those people? How do you look for ways to show the authenticity without being too precious about it, like sharing some of those inside jokes and not being scared to show the shortcomings along with the victories? Being honest about who we are, but also not being afraid to be vulnerable.
Well, for me, one of the biggest parts of placing a reader, I want to say smack dab in the middle of a story, which to me is such a Southern phrase, is the dialogue, not only just the dialogue, but the vernacular speech, the local speech, the way we talk. And to your point about could be writing about the Bronx or down in Miami or whatever part of the country you're from, there's going to be these little idiosyncrasies that connect you as a person that lives in that part of the world to that. And it goes without saying that everybody, I think, knows how Southerners talk. We have this drawl and we have ways of saying things. And so for me, I'm always looking for voice. And voice is one of the big things that I try to focus on when I'm writing the story. I try to give each character some unique twist to the way they might say things. And with this book in particular, and actually with my other book that's set in the North Carolina mountains, The Road to Bittersweet, I spent a lot of time listening to audio tape, believe it or not. Not that I need to do that because I can just go out and, my back door and listen to how people talk. But there's a certain way that people in the mountains speak. And I wanted to be sure that I represented that accurately. So that's one of the things. And then, just our little sayings like you alluded to. We've got things that we say that tie us and connect other people into the story, I think, more solidly. And that's like smack dab in the middle, for example, stuff like that. And, there's always a kind of a running joke about some of the food that we eat down here. I mean, I could kind of go on and on. Our porch sitting, the fact that a big portion of the South, with the exception of some of our fine cities, like Charleston and Savannah and Charlotte, North Carolina, and places like that, that are obviously kind of booming right now because everybody wants to come and live in the South. But it's a rural setting, and there's still a lot of farmland. And yes, we're still working cotton and tobacco and corn and soybean. And I mean, that's what you expect to see down here. And roadside stands with boiled peanuts, things like that. Like I said, I could go on and on and on about just you can just mention these little things to me in a story and talk about eating a bowl of grits. And that's where you end up. You're there. You're solidly in the South at that point.
Well, the roadside stands are cranking up now with fresh tomatoes and peaches and boiled peanuts for sure.
That's right. Strawberries. We just
strawberries, squash, yeah, all that good stuff.
Oh yeah.
Donna, does it ever surprise you when someone from far away from where you're from outside the South, connects with one of your stories and, gushes to you about how much one of these stories meant to you? Does it ever surprise you?
It does. It does, because a few of my books, like I love to hold giveaways. And sometimes I'm a little tongue-in-cheek when I see that I'm sending it off to a reader in New York, for instance, or Idaho, or someplace like that. And I'm always a little bit worried that going back to that vernacular speech, the colloquial language that I use, I wonder, but a lot of times they will write to me. I've had letters from people and they just talk about how they absolutely love Southern stories. I've even had a couple of people tell me, this is why I want to move to the South. I just love the way you all talk. And it has surprised me a couple of times that they have connected so well with them, but I'm glad, obviously.
Of course. Speaking of families and feeling like you're part of something, you make some of the most fantastic characters. Your books and your names are fantastic as well. Tell me about the Sassers. First off, what a great name, and I think I've met some Sassers before, and I've definitely met people like them before. These are prototypical of a lot of people that I've met through the years, and even some of my family, a couple generations back, could have easily stepped into this world. I'm not saying my grandfather had a still or not. That's for the revenuers to decide. But anyway, tell me about the Sassers. Where did they come from for you?
Well, so this is kind of, I've actually got a couple of stories here. Number one, I have to sort of give a little nod to a writer friend of mine. I talked to her about this name. I said, listen, I absolutely love this last name. It's the perfect name for my family. Can I use your last name? And she said, absolutely. And the writer is, I don't know if you're going to know her or not. She's a great Southern writer named Jessie Sasser. She wrote a book called Cradle Bird. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of the book. I don't know her, but I'm making a note right now to look her up.
Okay. And she's actually working on a new book right now. But she and I have become good friends. And so what was kind of funny about the whole Sasser story and Jessie's name in particular, Jessie's name was something else different. And I said, that does not suit a girl that is involved, her family's involved in moonshine. It needed to be a little tougher. It was too sweet of a name, if you get my drift. Yeah. And so I came up with Jessie, and I'm just blindly talking to JC, which is, I call her Jana. I don't call her JC. But anyway, she goes by Jessie Sasser for her writing. And I was talking to her about it, and I said, Jana, I said, I changed her name. It's going to be Jessie. And she paused. And she's like, yeah, Jessie Sasser. And I don't know if that was buried in my mind or what, but subliminal. But anyway, so that's how Jessie came to get her name. But the Sassers in particular, where they come from, strictly from my mind, but I knew that Wilkes County was steeped in moonshine. I had heard about it all my life, off and on, just little stories here and there. I knew one day, and we got the history of NASCAR and all of that, but I just knew one day I wanted to write a book about moonshining. And so truly writing this story is like, it's just a organic process. I don't know how these people are going to be when I first start out. I simply knew that I wanted to plunk a character down into the middle of a moonshine making operation, and I wanted that character to not want to be a part of it. And all of the things that happened for Jessie Sasser to turn against the moonshining, the death of her mother in the beginning of the book, her father's persistence in it and refusing to speak about how her mother died. There's little bits and pieces of truth in that beginning and in that opening line. My mother actually caught on fire. She lived and she was fine. She lived till she was almost 83 years old. But the Sassers literally just came from a desire to write about a moonshining family. And then I did a lot of research and little bits and pieces of things that I learned. I started to cobble together their story.
I am a sucker for a great first line. I love writing a great first line. There's something about just coming up with a zinger that will grab people and not let them go. And the first line of this book, the only memory I have of Mama, she was on fire. I'm hooked. I am all in on that. How soon in the writing did that line come to you? Was it literally the first line that you wrote, or did it come after some work had been done on the story?
I wish it would happen like this all the time. That was literally the first line, because I knew, based on what had happened with my mother, I thought, that is something I have got to use one of these days. And I had actually talked to her about it. Mom, do you mind if I use that incident? She's, I don't care. I'm perfectly fine,
Right.
But that is how I, worked around this issue with Jessie and developed what's the word of it? Just feeling so dead set against it, dead set against the moonshining. And so that was the first line that I wrote. I thought because, stills have a history of blowing up. And so I thought, the reader can be placed immediately into the story with a scene like this. And the book almost wrote itself. I did a lot of research, but there was parts of it where I just felt like, wow, how did I get those 2,000 words in today? They just seemed to come sometimes, which was fantastic.
I have to ask you about research, because there's research that is where you read history books and you read some newspaper clips and you try to get the facts of what happened so that you have a coherent timeline and all of that stuff. There's that research. But then there's research that you do that allows you to capture the flavor of what was going on. When you start talking to an old timer or something about a new story that you dug up, and they kind of give you that sly smile, and they're like, well, that's what the newspaper said, but do you want to know what really happened? And then you get the exaggerations and the how a story grows, and how a lot of times they're absolutely right. There is more to the story than what gets reported. But then also there's flavor of a character and a place that you can't put into a news article. How do you do the kind of research you do that allows you to so completely capture this time and place?
I actually this was a little different from my typical research. I had 2 thesis papers that I happened across. Again, probably just a Google search or something like that. And these thesis papers, one of them in particular, it was titled Chasing the Good Old Boys and Girls of Wilkes County. And it was, there you go right there. You can kind of tell, And so I didn't read the thesis paper from beginning to end. It was huge. It was like 250 pages. But I definitely paid attention to enough of it to get a good sense of what was happening in Wilkes County. And then there was actually a gentleman, and I wished I could remember what his name was, because it was truly just a random encounter online on Facebook. And I found out about him through a different Google search, but he lived in Wilkes County and used to write for the local paper. And he would write small articles, and I had found those articles that he had written, and he would talk about 10th Street and how 10th Street on a Saturday night was not some place that you might want to be, because there would be fights going on. People were visiting I guess you could call it a little bit of a red light district, a little bit of operation like that going on behind the scenes. There were people drinking surreptitiously. They weren't supposed to be drinking, but they were drinking the moonshine, the white lightning. So that was also a big part of it, just like you talk about that flavor. And using that thesis paper and in contacting this gentleman, I want to say, I just remembered it. I think his name was Rod Pearson. But he actually helped me get some of the directions right. Like, I didn't know, for instance, okay, so we were talking about Wilkesboro and North Wilkesboro, and where exactly does that river go to separate the two of them? And was there a hospital there? I needed those kind of details. But for these characters that are in the book, again, it's just, I've always said that my characters are a little bit like Frankenstein, in that I am piecing together bits and pieces of people that I've known, people that I don't want to know, and just trying to cobble together interesting characters, and then really thinking about, okay, what's the realistic way they should react in this kind of a situation?
Right. Jessie Sasser has this memory of her mother that we talked about, and she tries to get to the truth of what really happened. She was small when it happened, and her daddy won't talk about it. And so she is left to construct in her mind what she thinks happened, and whether it be true or not, I'll let the readers find out for themselves in the book. But she believes that the moonshine, which is so much a part of her family identity, is to blame for her mother's death, and she takes matters into her own hands. And unfortunately, in her mind, the way to handle this is to take care of matters and then blame it on someone else. That then ignites this Hatfields and McCoys kind of, feud.
Yeah.
This was so much fun to follow. And you kept ratcheting the stakes up higher and higher and higher as the book went on. Was this feud that kind of gets set off, was that based on anything that was real or anything that you had come across in your research?
Well, the thing that's kind of interesting about that research and about like the whole Hatfield and the McCoys, the one thing that I didn't want to do was to have, for instance, Jessie Sasser obviously attracted to a Murray, and that because that would be too Hatfield and McCoy. It's been done too many times. It's the old Romeo and Juliet thing. I didn't want to do that. I wanted every single bit of her to work against anything to do with Moonshine, from her own family to their main antagonists, the Murrays. But at the same time, she had this sort of wish to have her own Eliot Ness. So the Untouchables during this time frame, 1960, was a big show. And she was hoping that no matter what she did, it would either get blamed on the Murrays or potentially get blamed on the revenuers. And so for her, she just, this was her mindset. She's just going against everything. And so I can't really say that there was a particular, I wasn't thinking so much of the Hatfield and the McCoys, but you, among many others, have made that comparison. And so and I know that it is because, hey, it's Moonshine. It's a rival family, one working against the other. Sassers are known for their good moonshine. It's safe to drink it, whereas the Murrays are known for their radiator type moonshine that was kind of dangerous to drink. And it's really about working, wanting to know that you've got these characters working against each other at all times, And so there was nothing that I was aware of other than that. As I wrote the story, it's like there's just got to be a lot of them rubbing up against each other in the wrong way and setting things off. Fire was kind of a theme in the book. I don't know if you picked up on that.
I definitely did.
But it was. Yeah.
There's Jessie Sasser is such a complex character, and I love the way that you treat her and you handle her in the writing of this. With all of the frustrations and the uncertainties that she feels, that manifests in her in the form of an eating disorder. And I love how you added that detail to the book, and that becomes a pretty pivotal part of the story, and the way that people around her respond and react to that. What was the thought process for you in including this detail in the book that really adds another dimension to the story?
Well, the one thing that I kept thinking about as I wrote this book, and she didn't have one at first. The way this started off originally, she was going to have a self-esteem issue. I knew food was going to be the thing for her. But in my mind, I was thinking, all of my other characters in my other books have been these young girls with a pretty good, they felt good about themselves. They were pretty and didn't have any kind of issue going on in their head about their self-esteem. I wanted Jessie Sasser to be very different from that. And so originally I thought, okay, we're going to have her maybe just have this really poor view of herself. She's going to eat a lot. Her brother, Merritt, is not going to like that. It's going to kind of disgust him maybe. And then it just, again, sort of like how this happens sometimes, I'm thinking it's not enough. It's just not enough. And then I started thinking about the time frame. And then I started thinking about Karen Carpenter and how today, I believe if Karen Carpenter had been coming around in her career today, probably was under a lot of pressure to perform, but maybe she would still be here because there's so much more help today for individuals that have these eating disorders. And it is actually a secret in my mind. It's a big secret. There's probably a lot more people out there that have this issue that we don't even know about. You just think of somebody as being thin. And this was and I thought this is going to be perfect. And, I didn't necessarily set out to write her in this way, but I kept thinking about it and I kept thinking there would be no help for her. This thing would manifest on its own. And this is how she felt like she could control something in her life. And that's kind of how it happened. It just, to me, I felt like the depth of something like this would just be a significant part of the story and would add, like you say, that dimension to her that was so unique and unusual and would give her a way to have control. And there's nothing nobody could really do about it. You see what I'm saying? She had complete control of this.
Right, which becomes a great metaphor for what Jessie's going through. That she's looking for control in anything, and it becomes something that through wanting control gets out of control. And I think that the character, the school nurse, I think is so great in this because she tells Jessie that this is, she describes it as the monster, that's inside her. And I think that's such a great metaphor. And I just love that you added that dimension to the story.
Yeah, I actually, as I wrote it, I did, again, the whole research thing, there was some pretty eye-opening things that I saw. I mean, I turned to YouTube, or not YouTube. I can't remember that. It was a site that was pretty graphic. I mean, you can find just about anything that you want to, but it was actually kind of scary in a way to know what young girls and maybe even older people. It seems like it's mostly young girls that suffer from this, and what they will do, and how far they will go. And that was the thing. That's how I got that detail and got to where I got with it. It can be pretty eye-opening and scary to know this.
Well, the new book is called The Moonshiner's Daughter. Donna, this is your best book yet, I believe, and I'm recommending it to everyone. We've got links to it in the show notes of this episode, and it's out in Kindle edition and paperback and audiobook. I definitely recommend the audiobook. If people are just learning about you and want to connect with all the great stuff that you do, is there a place they can connect with you online?
Yes, I feel like I'm all over the place, to be honest with you. I have a website.
That's good these days.
DonnaEverhart.com, and there are links to my social media like Facebook and Twitter there. And if they wanted to sign up, I do a blog periodically, particularly when I'm in the process of promoting a book. So DonnaEverhart.com is probably the easiest way for people to find me, and then they can go from there and connect on social media with the Facebook links and the Twitter account.
We'll put links to all of that in the show notes of this episode to make it easy for people to find you. The Moonshiner's Daughter, such a great book. Thank you so much, Donna, for coming back on the show.
I really appreciate it, and it's good to hear you think it's the best one yet. You know, we're supposed to improve with each one.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to keep that true. Thank you so much.
Before We Ever Spoke by Dan Largent. Cleveland, Ohio, 2006. After a chance encounter, 3 people soon find out that life can sometimes thrust us into the public eye, even when taking great measures to avoid it. Cooper Madison was the best pitcher in baseball after being drafted number 1 overall in 1996 from the small Gulf Coast town of Pass Christian, Mississippi. 1 year after announcing his sudden and shocking retirement, he finds himself seeking anonymity in Cleveland, Ohio. Kara Knox is the youngest sibling to 3 older brothers. After a tragic work accident to her closest relative, she has built up a tough exterior as she begins her final year of college at Cleveland State University. Jason Knox, Kara's oldest brother, is the lead detective on Cleveland's Edgewater Park killer case. After months without a suspect, he's feeling the heat from his media-hungry chief. Serendipity intervenes, and all 3 learn that perception and reality are paths that rarely ever intersect. Before We Ever Spoke by Dan Largent. Hey folks, you really ought to check out Patricia Gillam's Heroes of Corvus series. Book 1 is called A Superhero's Duty. A fight between a second-generation superhero named Red Bolt and a villain for hire named Icarus goes terribly wrong, resulting in the drowning deaths of 3 innocent civilians and orphaning a 6-year-old boy. Racked with guilt, Red Bolt visits Cameron Wilson at the hospital every night and won't leave the boy's side until he falls asleep. Befriended by a night shift nurse, the man in costume begins to disclose what really happened after the fight and why he feels the death of Cameron's parents and sister fall on his actions. A superhero didn't survive that night, and Cameron and the rest of the city are not out of danger. A Superhero's Duty, Book 1 of the Heroes of Corvus by Patricia Gillam. Get this series now.